morning. I have 9 o'clock, so we will call, excuse me, this meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee to order. Looks like the first thing first let me start off by saying welcome everyone. I appreciate you for being here and taking your time this morning to join us. Our first item on the agenda is to accept the minutes of the February 7th meeting. I would assume that those on the call have already read and reviewed those. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to accept said meetings.
Also move.
All right, we got a first. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded. All right. So you guys ready for the question? All in favor, say by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
I don't remember how that works.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. Appreciate that. The minutes have been approved unanimously.
I think that's the first time.
Moving right along, we have the next item on our agenda is committee member updates. Mr. Beeman has resigned due to a potential conflict of interest by taking a job with CLA. As we all know, Clifton Larson Allen handles our auditing. So we appreciate Mr. Beeman, his time and service on the committee, and wish him well in his next endeavor. Also, sadly, Mr. Jennings, who's with us today, is reaching the end of his second 3-year term. Wanted to say personally thank you, Tom, for your commitment to the committee and always being involved and asking those questions that enrich us all and keeping us in check. So thank you so much for your service to the committee, and we appreciate you so much. Next, we have a presentation from Mr. Dominic Cristofaro from Deep Blue Investments, and I understand that you may have some other of your team members on with us as well. So with that being said, we are interested to hear what you have to say, and take it away, sir.
All right, good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Yes, thank you. So I'm Dominic Cristofaro, Director of Client Advisory Services for Deep Blue Investments. On the call with me today, I also have one of our newest members, Ed Polanski. He was just joined the firm a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, as the Director of Client Services. So you'll be seeing and hearing from Ed. I think some of you already, I know Heather, some of you already know Ed from his previous career. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll go into the quarterly performance review for the school district.
Young Fletcher or something like that. Young Fletcher.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah. So I'll
Excellent. Okay. So we'll go right into this. We're going to start just first. We'll just do a portfolio review. We'll look at compliance and the summary accounts, and then we'll dive a little bit into each of the portfolios that we manage for the school district. So as far as an executive summary, we have your long-term portfolio. That portfolio currently has a duration which is 0.8, which is much shorter than the index, which is by design to take advantage of the current interest rate market environment. As you can see, the yield on that portfolio is 4.68 compared to the index at 4.33. That portfolio did earn just under 190,000 for the quarter, and the credit quality of that portfolio is very high quality AA securities. Also for the quarter, we had a very small underperformance. We returned 1.2 versus the benchmark at 1.52, okay? Then we also have a small short-term portfolio. This is a portfolio where we had a lot of individual commercial paper that we laddered. Most of that has matured, and we moved that into the Florida Fit Choice pool. But on that portfolio, what remains there is right now is very short, it's really money market, and it's yielding about 4.63. And for the quarter, it earned just over $3,400. Again, that portfolio is a money market, so it's also a very high quality portfolio. So as far as what's going on in the economy, more or less what we've seen from last year, the theme of inflation continues to be the concern for the Fed. Now, in the last month, in March, we saw a small uptick in the CPI of 0.1 and a small uptick in core CPI of 0.4. But overall, from February to March, we saw a downtick on a year-over-year basis from 6% to 5% in the CPI. So we're starting to see a little bit of a turning in inflation. And that was primarily due to, as you all know, if you think about February, March, we saw a lot of energy prices. Specifically, if you obviously go to the gas pump, you see that prices had come down. Now we'll kind of see that this month, because if you look at March and in May, we're kind of seeing again an uptick in energy prices. So that may be something that reverses itself. So this is still a very big concern for the Fed. Another area that's continued to show inflation pressures is housing. That continues to go up, as well as wage pressures because of the very tight labor market. As far as the economy and the growth of the GDP, we saw GDP slow down slightly from about 3.2% to 2.6% in the fourth quarter. In April, they released the first quarter numbers. We saw again a slowdown there of 1.1. So, the theme continues to be that we're slowing down, and that the likelihood of a recession is coming. The question still remains is how long is that recession going to last? And when is it going to start? I think the sentiment in the market, and we're kind of in tune with that, is that we're going to start to see the economy continue to slow down and maybe go into a recession towards the end of the year. As far as interest rate concerned, the Fed continues to raise rates. We expect the Fed to raise rates another quarter point here this week, and likely at the next meeting. And then we think that the Fed is at that point is going to pause. However, on a longer-term basis, we still see that the rates are going to continue to stay higher longer. So what does that mean for you all? In a way, that's a good thing for the school district, because a lot of your investments are very short-term cash investments. And so those longer-term, those lower short-term rates really mean more income for your portfolios, at least for the foreseeable future. We don't see, interest rates coming down anytime soon. So that's really good for your portfolios. Is there any questions as far as the economy? Anybody that has any questions? Okay, so the next slide here basically looks at the fixed income indices, and really the takeaway from this is that you can see in 2022 through the third quarter we saw a lot of negative returns, and that's in line with the way fixed income work. As yields go up, prices in these bonds go down. So you see a lot of negative. We saw a little bit of reversal in that in the fourth quarter, and again we continue to see that in the first quarter. That's been primarily driven by a flight to quality, as folks have been sort of concerned about what's going on with the banks. They sort of de-risk and put money in shorter term, and so causing some of these indices to have some positive returns. So we'll see what happens over the year, but we do expect rates to continue to go up. So, in the month of April, we'll probably saw a reversal of this, where we'll see some negative returns in these indices. As far as the themes for Deep Blue, we continue to stress to our clients that to stay short, to be able to take advantage of increasing rates. We're looking at agencies, both fixed and floating rate. We have added substantial floating rate to our portfolios so that we can take advantage as rates go up. Those portfolios will move. We do believe that staying high quality is still the way to go, and the best thing is to really focus on liquidity and staying short to be able to take advantage of those interest rate increases. Some longer term bonds are starting to look compelling, but we think that right now the best thing is to stay short. We're going to start looking here towards the middle end of the year in third quarter, whether it's a time to start sort of extending duration. But that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens in the market and what the Fed does, but at some point it will be a good time to lock in on those long-term rates. Any questions on our strategy? Okay. Next, we'll just go into the portfolio review. The first slide here looks at your compliance, which is something that very important, and obviously your auditors and things look at. As you can see here, this is your compliance on an overall basis by sector type. When you look across the board here, if you look at this column here that says in compliance, you can see that it's yes across the board. So as of the end of March, all your investments, all your sectors were within your investment policy guidelines. So there's no issues there. We're well within your investment policy. The next page shows you a more granular look. So we're looking at your compliance on an issuer level. As you can see here, again, once again, this last column here, you can see that everything is in compliance. This includes all your different securities as well as your pools and your money markets. So again, this page as well as the second page here, both showing that you're well in compliance. Does anybody have any questions on the compliance summary so far? Okay, thank you. So here is just an overall look, aggregate look at your portfolios that we manage for you. We have your Pasco County schools, which is about 49.7 million. That's your longer term portfolio. And then we have your short term portfolio, which is basically the 326,000 that we have in that money market from the securities that matured. You can see here the yield on these accounts for the long term is about 4.68%, as well as the short term at 4.63. And if you look at to the right here, you're what we talked about earlier, you're at about 190,000 in your longer term portfolio and about 3,000 for the quarter in your shorter term portfolio. And if you look at the durations, very short. The long term portfolio is at 0.8, and the short term portfolio is very short. So, and these portfolios are by design. The long term portfolio is by design put together to be very short versus the index, because we want to take advantage of these higher interest rates as they continue to go up. Now we'll just look at the long-term portfolio on its own. If we look at the top left corner, you can see the performance information. Again, duration 0.8 versus the index at 1.83. So about a year shorter than the index. However, the yield in this portfolio, because we're staying short and shorter yields currently are higher than longer yields, we have a yield of 4.68 versus the index at about 4.33. Okay, again, average credit quality, AA, which is very high quality. As we move down below to the earned income for the quarter, which we discussed, total earned income about 190,000. Okay, and then you look at how the portfolio is currently diversified. We have 55% of your portfolio in U.S. government securities. We have about just under 18% in agencies. We have some corporate bonds at 16%, municipal bonds. You have a little bit of money market, and cash is sort of some residual cash that was sort of the timing of the month. But so this kind of looks at how your portfolio is currently diversified. The top right corner is your portfolio characteristics. So you can see that that portfolio was total value was just under 4.7 million, and again, credit quality very high. Importantly is if you look below at your maturity distribution, we have quite a bit, as far as, because we're short duration wise, you can see that the maturities that we have, you have quite a bit of maturities in the 6 month and 6 to 12 months. And that is by design, obviously, so that as things mature and rates go up, we can capture those higher rates for the school district. Is there any questions as far as the characteristics of the summary of the portfolio? Okay. Next page is the performance of this portfolio versus the index. As I mentioned earlier, this portfolio lagged a little bit versus the index for the quarter, and that was primarily due, as I mentioned, to that sort of flight to quality. And so, so for the quarter, we're behind about 32 basis points. But we're in this portfolio still very well positioned to take advantage of continued rate hikes. As you look at the 1 year, well above the index at 1.07 versus 0.2 for the index. So this portfolio is performing well and is well positioned to continue to take advantage of interest rate increases. Is there any questions on the performance page? Thank you. Okay. The next couple pages are basically a summary of your transactions for the month. Now, I won't go into the individual details. This is more for your information. Okay. And then lastly, we'll look at the short-term portfolio. Now, as I mentioned, this portfolio right now is just the money market. This had been a strategy that we put in place last year to try to capture rates and ladder a portfolio of commercial paper. As those matured, we moved those commercial paper, those maturities back to the school district to either use for liquidity, and then we reinvested as the funds came back in during tax season, November, December, and January. We got those reinvested into our Florida Fit Choice Pool, and so also the Florida Fit Cash Pool, so that we can ladder those investments and try to capture those higher short-term yields. This portfolio for the quarter basically was in line with the benchmark at 1.07, and the benchmark here is the 30-day LGIP index. And this page is just basically the transactions for the quarter. So that pretty much covers the presentation on the portfolio, and I just want to open up to any questions.
Don't misinterpret my comment, but if I'm an outsider looking in and I see that inflation is 6 to 8% and we're earning 4%, that means that the value of our money is going down every month in terms of spending power.
Right. And that's, across the board right now, that's sort of the case. And that's why the Fed is working hard to try to tame inflation, because obviously not just the school districts, but everyone's earning power goes down, because as inflation is higher than what you're earning or what you're obviously able to buy less. So yeah, that is the case. That's a good observation. And hopefully here, as the Fed continues to raise rates and inflation continues to get under control, we're year over year we're at 5%. So we've come down from the highs of probably more than a year ago, like 9%. So we're headed in the right direction. Inflation is not completely going to go away. There's still a lot of wage pressures with, the unemployment is very low. Additionally, we continue to see inflation in energy and food, and some of those sectors. It's going to be hard, for example, in the labor market and housing, for it to come down. So the Fed continues to be concerned. Obviously, inflation is a big thing on their mind, and so we'll see what happens going forward.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Dominic, thank you so much for that. I appreciate you and your time and your team being on the call today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along, I don't see that Heather has come on, so if it's okay with you, Carol, are you still on?
I am, and Align is here. Align is prepared to do.
Oh, I didn't see that. I need to advance my screen, Align. Sorry about that. I can only see 3 people.
No, we got a lot more than 3.
Align, well, I appreciate you being here this morning, and if you will go on with our finance update, that'll be fabulous.
All right, give me a second. Let me share my screen. There it goes. Can you see my screen okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry about that. And you can see the screen there, the January financial statements.
I cannot.
Okay. There we go. Sorry about that.
No, I can.
Okay, so these were the financial statements you were sent. The most recent, which we have, is through January 31st, and we are diligently working on getting the rest of the months closed out and finalized. We did have to go back and make a correction to the December financials related to an entry of revenue into the health insurance fund that had not been recorded. And given the fact that when the actuaries look at the plan, the health plan, they look at it over the calendar year instead of the fiscal year. That's why we had to put that pause on our closing schedules and go back and make sure it matched up with the calendar year in December, accrue that revenue back, and then be able to start moving forward. Starting here, the first page you'll see is our balance sheet. In our balance sheet accounts, you can see it's broken out by the fund types at the top. Currently, our total assets are $3.4 billion, but of course the majority of that is in our general fixed assets to $2.3 billion roughly, but that's our facilities and all of our buildings. Where we mostly see a lot of interest, obviously, is over here on our general fund, our special revenue funds, those that we can have a little bit, the board has a little bit more control over, not necessarily the special revenue funds. Again, those are our grants, and a lot of times there's restrictions with how that money can be used. So you see a lot of attention being paid, especially to the general fund side. On ending in January 31st, our total assets were $367 million. Our total cash was $326 million in the general fund. That, however, once we get February's and March's financials out, you'll see some of that going down as we take some of that cash and send it back to reinvest. We had a large investment that we had with Fifth Third Bank that matured right at the end of November. And in December, we turned right back around and invested some of that money. But additionally, we've been getting, still receiving some of the local tax revenue from obviously our property taxes. That usually starts to come in November, but around December, January timeframe is when we see a lot of that revenue come in. So that's why the cash here in January seems so high. But again, a lot of that has been sent back over to invest, just as Dominic was sharing on the investment side, so that we can keep that money secure and draw it down when necessary. Any questions on this page?
I have a few
Yes.
questions on that.
Yes.
Could you explain the negative values for investments and
Yes.
in the general, and then for the cash, negative cash in a couple of those other columns?
Yes.
Okay.
So on the general fund side, over on the investments, I'll take you back to prior October, and you can see where we had a positive there over on the general fund side and 200 million over on the capital side. So that relates back to December, when we received those investments that matured, the Fifth Third, and that cash came in right at the end of November. And so that money obviously depleted the investment side and came up to the cash side. When it was reinvested, part of the cash balancing process, it ended up getting recorded on our side, the majority of it here on the capital projects fund. We then also in January turned around, it's not reflected here, but right at the start of February, we turned around and sent some of that investment cash back, some of that cash back into investments. And that's not reflected here, obviously, because that was done the first week of February. So that will reflect on the next financial statements. And when we're able to do that, those cash balancing entries to clean up some of that red. Same thing with the cash side here on the capital projects. This in February will show cleaned up again. This is where we had not been drawing down as much on the impact fee. When we invest the money, we put it in different funds, if you will, or different accounts on the investment side, and we invest the impact fees in a separate account to keep that for the capital projects. And so we had not drawn down on those funds for a little bit, so we've turned around and gotten those drawn down now in March, I believe. So by the time we close February and March, those amounts there in the red on the capital projects will be cleaned up as well. So it goes back to how it's recorded internally on our side and on the cash balancing side at entries that we do at the end of the month and when we draw down some of these funds from the investments. But over on the total side, you can see everything is obviously in the black there. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes, thank you. That
Okay.
explains it. Thank you.
So moving along over to our liabilities and our fund equity, you can see ending January, we had a total of close to $700 million in liabilities. On the general fund side, $265 million, the bulk of that being our salaries and our deferred revenue for the month. Over on the fund equity side, you can see our unassigned fund balance, which is where a lot of attention is paid, obviously, to. It's showing $78 million currently for the end of January. That number will change as the year progresses. And one of the slides here will show you the projected ending fund balance, which is obviously very important to the board. We have to stay above 3% for the state. The board has a policy they set where they want it at 5% for the year end. And so that obviously turns into an area where a lot of discussion takes place regarding in the finance world, is what our ending fund balance is going to be and trying to properly project that out. This is just a high-level summary of all the funds. Again, our beginning fund balance, our year-to-date revenues, our year-to-date expenditures, and this is what our fund balance would look like if we were to close the year today. But again, that number will change as the year progresses. This is just a table showing that information. So this is just looking at the general fund, our current revenues and expenditures compared to our budget for the year. You can see currently we have 47% of our budget still outstanding regarding revenues. The majority of that, these state sources here, 46%, that is our grants. And obviously we don't draw down on grants until we've expensed the money. Oftentimes with grants, people think the money's just there all ready to go, but all of our grants are reimbursement based. There's a few that the state will front quarterly. Those are very small amounts, some of the smaller grants, but the bulk of our grants, Title I, the larger ones, we actually draw down the money after we've expensed it. And of course, we have over the last couple of years with all of the educational relief funds, ARP, CARES, ESSER, GEAR, there's a lot of grant money still there, but that money will eventually be used up before those awards come to an end. On the expenditure side, we are just at about 50% of our budgeted expenditures for the year. Obviously on the general fund side, the majority of that over on the instructional side at 48%.
Aline, real quick on that, can
Yes.
you explain how the food services item got so out of whack there?
That was some entry that was done. I've had the person over food service look into that to clean it up for February. I can email you and get you more information on exactly what it was, but that was some expenditure that was recorded there in that fund, and I have to go back and get with him on how he cleaned that up for February.
Yeah, that'd be excellent if you could, we get that and share with the entire committee. I think just the way
Yes.
you're showing that we're cleaning that up.
Yep.
And I have another question, and this is very, very basic, but I just don't know the background on this. There's an original budget and a current budget. When is the current budget determined? Is that something, it's an adjusted budget somewhere during the year?
Yes, the original budget is what we load for the start of the year for July. Through the year, amendments are done over on the budget side. Any new grants that we receive, any new awards that we receive. So that number does change.
So that's like a living budget, basically.
Yes, that would be, it could be also called the amended budget as well.
Okay, and that's done monthly? I mean, or as things come up?
As new awards are received from the state, new grants that come down, and budgetary transfers that also take place over on the budget side.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a table summarizing the previous slide. So here is the summary for the projected ending fund balance that I was mentioning. The ending fund balance for last year was set pretty high at 9.4%, and I focus on the last row here at the bottom because that's the unrestricted fund balance that really the board has more discretion over. If you look at the previous row, you'll see it's much higher, but again, that includes any and all of the other funds, the special revenues and other restricted funds that make up part of that ending fund balance. Over on the unassigned side, originally when the budget was set up, they projected it at 3.73. Year to date now, given what the current projection is 4.22, but again, that's always a moving target. That's something that we work with budget on. They're the ones that project that out, looking into the future of any expenditures that we see that are coming our way. Again, talking with the federal programs department to make sure of any large expenditures that they're anticipating regarding any grants that are coming due. And just the seasonal nature of education, of when certain items take place throughout the fiscal year. Here is an expenditures detail for the general fund, breaking it out by the different classifications that we use: salaries, benefits, purchase services, energy services, supplies, capital outlay, and then miscellaneous expenses. Like in any organization, the majority of the expenditures live here in the HCM portion. 67% currently of our expenditures have been in salaries and benefits. And just a pie chart breaking out that information again. This table here, move this out of the way, is a table we have showing a comparison to the revenues and the expenditures during the same period of last fiscal year. So in this column here, this is our current actuals that we have, revenue and expenditures down at the bottom. Here we have the prior year, and then a comparison of those two periods for the year. So currently, we are 11% above revenues for last year, and just pretty close, but just a little bit above on expenditures at 1.74%.
Excuse me, Alan.
Yes.
Going back to the previous slide where you indicated the percentage of expenses
Yes.
in the current year budget, how do those figures compare with prior years? 49% for salaries, 18% for health benefits. How does that compare with prior years?
I can provide a table showing that, comparing this table to last year, that I can do for you. I was going to wait till the end to bring this up, but I wanted to use this opportunity to ask the committee. These slides and this table in the presentation of the financials, obviously coming into the role this fiscal year, I've just mirrored how everything has been presented in prior years. But if there's any data or slides that the committee thinks would be helpful, have the data presented in another way, I'm very open to that. Some of this information is very high level, but again, just like your question regarding comparing the actual expenditures by classification to prior year, that's something that we can certainly generate and provide it on the monthly financials going forward. Some of this information here, given the nature of school finance, comparing some of this data to prior year can be helpful, like total revenues and total expenditures in this format, but that really can fluctuate, especially on the special revenue side. There's so many grants that are one-time grants that can skew this number and maybe not give an ideal picture of how we are comparing to prior year. An example I'll use is, as we've been working through the audit for last year, there was the ECF grant that came down. It was a one-time grant during the year 21-22 for purchasing of devices for the students. So that was a fairly large grant, close to $30 million that was awarded and spent in that 1 year. So going back now and comparing that year to the prior year or prior year to current year, that 30 million is not in this year's budget, for example. It's not part of our finances this year. It's not part of our expenditures or our revenue. So sometimes this slide here, especially, there's value to it, but it really has to be taken with a lot of context when you see some of these numbers here on a slide like this, for example. But getting back to your question, yes, I will, making a note here, I will generate that table. I can send it to you for January, and I can include that going forward if the committee thinks that'll be a helpful slide to have.
I would agree with making that included as we meet. I think it's
Okay.
good to have the comparison.
And as I go along, again, if you have any other variations on how you would like to see this data presented, please let me know. I'll make notes. I can make those changes going forward. And again, when we get to the end, if there's something you feel like you want to be able to see, I can work with my staff and with budget staff, and we can certainly provide some of that data. This is a pie chart of the previous slide where we had the expenses by classification. Yes.
In regard to your prior comment about that grant you received, that go into the general fund?
Yes. Well, no, it was special revenue. I'm sorry.
So isn't the general fund the one that you really are interested in terms of expenses of the?
Yes. I was making an observation just in general because we have this slide here where we compare prior year by period to current year by period in this same format for each of the major fund classifications. So it was more an observation just of how, year to year, when you're comparing those one-off situations, those unique awards or programs that the state puts through, without that context, just looking at that percentage alone really may not give the full picture. So this is a pie chart again of the classification, the expenses by classification. Again, the majority residing in salaries and employee benefits. This is a bar chart just showing that same information again, but by functional area: instructional, school admin, general admin, maintenance, operation of plants. Again, the majority of our expenditures obviously are in the instructional functional area. So this is again the summary now of the capital projects. Obviously not as involved as the general fund. Currently we are at 38% revenue received for the year, and 43% of expenditures for the year. The revenue side for capital projects, the bulk of that comes from LCI, our local capital improvement from the county, and so that money doesn't flow in until the school board formally makes a request from the BOCC to have that money pulled in. Here's the comparison of the capital projects fund to the same period last year, ending January. Revenues are slightly up at 3.63%, and the expenditures are down by 1.5%. And just a chart showing that information regarding our revenue. Again, the majority of the revenues for the capital fund comes from the local sources, which there's been an increase obviously with all the growth in the county that everyone can tell you about, that is a struggle for pretty much every government agency currently. Here in Polk County is the growth is welcome, and the revenues that come with it are welcome, but it's keeping up with the ability to provide the services and keep up with the growth where the challenge is. And here's the expenditures from the capital projects fund, obviously facilities and construction, and then the transfers out is a lot of that money is used to, some of it is invested. Again, we hold on to it for the future, and then some of that gets transferred to help fund some of the other expenses. The charter schools also get the portion that comes from the state is rolled in here too, and that gets transferred to provide them with their state capital outlay. On the special revenue funds, we've received 75% of our budgeted revenue so far, and expenditures at 76%. The majority of our grants obviously come from the state, and with the grants, like I said, we don't typically draw down until we've expensed the money for some of these grants. And obviously there's been, with the COVID grants that have come in, there's been more than usual on the special revenue fund side. But again, we anticipate that those will eventually come to an end, and it'll go back to how we've seen in previous years. Here's a comparison of our special revenue. I'm sorry, not a comparison. This is the detail of the expenditures of where the funds from special revenues is being spent. 37% in salaries, together with the benefits. And then we've had 129 million so far, almost 130 million spent from our special revenues, with the majority going towards instruction, and obviously food service is considered special revenue. And there's a pie chart showing that previous slide. Here's our comparison to prior year. Revenue, we're almost at 29% compared to last year, and 30% expenditures. And again, the cyclical nature of grants, of when they're awarded, when a lot of this money is spent, and can be a part of that, the reason for such a high variance. The majority of our revenues, again, coming from the state, and the majority of our expenditures in the instructional realm and in food services. On our debt service funds, 16.2% revenues year to date, and 18.10% of our expenses is what we have remaining in the budget for the year. A lot of our debt service payments are done quarterly, so. Here's comparing to prior year, and again, with our debt service, the way we have it structured, it's pretty similar year to year. We haven't taken out any new, the district hasn't issued any new bonds or taken out any new debt since 2021, where there was a refinance of some old debt. And this last slide here is our, what we call our internal service fund, which is our health fund. And you can see there where we are ending in January. Again, we had to go back in December and record that extra revenue in there. And over on the for the group insurance, for the health insurance, so ending January, the retained earnings for the year currently for January are at 4.6 million for the health insurance fund, and 6.1 million overall. And that is the end of the financial statements, but I'll go back again, open it up to any questions, and please, any suggestions on what the board feels would be, the committee feels would be a good, of this. Oops, sorry, did I mute there for a second?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ms. Cunningham, yes.
Okay, dear. Good morning, sir. What
Good
a
morning.
great presentation. I agree with Tom. I think if you could create maybe another pie chart like you had for the previous year, I think it would be easy to see the changes. So if you, to me, if you would just add that pie chart in there, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
And then secondly, I wanted to ask, I know that we said earlier in your presentation, fund balance as of January 31st, which is what you're reporting today, was at 4.3 something. I couldn't exactly read it on the thing. My question is, it is May 2nd, and we're coming into the end of our fiscal year of June 30th. And I just wondered, are you all predicting that we will meet our board request of 5%? Do you think we're going to get there? I mean, we usually do, but it's comforting to hear it from our staff.
So I know Heather was pulled into another meeting. I know she had been communicating with budget.
Yes.
Working on projecting the fund balance out through the end of the year.
Okay.
We can certainly get you that information as to what their current projection is. I don't want to get ahead of them and give a number and have them come back with something different.
Okay, but I mean, I know it's not perfect, but we're predicting, and I just want to kind of be reassured that we're looking at being over the 5%.
So I'm looking at the last email where it was being discussed, and it seems to be that that's the case. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, ahead of them, and give an exact, because even 1 percentage point on the fund balance
Sure. It's huge.
Can equate to several $1 million. So they were still looking at that.
Yeah,
And so I'll defer to the budget office on that one.
All right, there, that's great. And when you all, determine that, I know we have a board meeting next week, so it may be even brought at that point in time. But if not, I'll ask Superintendent Hyde. But it being as we're this far along in the year,
Yes.
it would be nice to know kind of where it looks like we're going to end up on June 30th. So great presentation, sir. Appreciate your time and talent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aline while we got him?
Aline, could you please update the committee on the audit, the district audit?
Yes. So we have a call in with the auditors this afternoon to discuss with them what the estimated time frame for ending the audit for last fiscal year will be. Again, given just the challenges this year with turnover in several high departments, a lot of the fiscal departments here, we've been working with them diligently. We also had what's called GASB 87, which is a new requirement for the presentation of the financials going forward that all school districts are starting this year. And it relates to how leases are recorded and presented on the financial statements. So we've been working diligently with them. Like I said, we have a call this afternoon. We have several items that we've submitted and we know are in their possession and they're being reviewed. Just yesterday, I got a few more requests for some clarifying documents and some items that we turned around and sent their way before the end of day. So I hope to have a better timeline after I speak to them this afternoon. But on our side, we're moving along, and anytime a request comes through, we do our best to get it to them within that day or a few days.
All right, we appreciate that. Moving right along, our next agenda item is the internal audit update. Carol, I'll let you have it and you and your team can discuss that.
Thanks, Travis. Can you see, I shared my screen, can you see that? Okay. So the first item, the internal funds audit was presented last meeting from Jennifer Christensen and her group, Carriggs and Ingram. And then what we do in internal audit is prepare a summary of the most common findings and recommendations from that audit. And we send that out to all schools just to help them prepare for future audits. We also include a graph of the last 3 years, just so they can see what kinds of things that, findings that occur in that audit. So we did that again this year. And then our construction agreed upon procedures that Carriggs and Ingram do. They completed Davenport Elementary School campus renovation project. Very small refund, but still a refund, $374. Generally, we're talking thousands, but in this particular case, that's what the refund was. But year to date, or over the last 15 years, we've recovered over $300,000 due to their work in this area, and that far exceeds their fees. And next we can talk about payroll audits that Davina has been working on. I will let her talk to you about that.
Hello, good morning. This past quarter, we completed the following payroll audits for the 22-23 fiscal year. We completed Lake Region High School, Lakeland High School, Mulberry High School, Bartow Elementary, and Frostproof Middle Senior High School. Besides the common findings, including principals not approving all payroll exemptions in SAP, non-exempt employees working on approved time over and under, posting errors and deficiencies with time records and leave forms, the following schools had atypical findings: Those were Mulberry High. They had 1/2 day of leave was not posted to SAP and charged to the employee, and custodial time cards were not signed by the principal. Bartow Elementary had 100% of the school posting to SAP for leave and overtime were not approved by the former principal. Non-exempt employees did not document time work, and custodial time cards were not signed by the principal. Frostproof Middle Senior High School, 99% of the school postings to SAP for the leave and overtime were not approved by the principal. Otherwise, this school had a minimal number of findings and their payroll records were in good order. The following audits had more than the typical number and severity of findings, and those were Lake Region High. They had 98% of the school posting to SAP for leave and overtime were not approved by the principal. 21 hours of pay leave was posted for an employee who had insufficient pay leave available. Non-exempt employees did not document time work. None of the custodial time cards were signed by the principal, and leave forms were not completed or not completed timely by several employees. Lakeland High School, payroll entries were not posted timely. Example, leaves was not posted for 5 weeks after the absences. Time records errors occurred for multiple employees, and leave forms were not completed timely by multiple employees. Do you have any questions?
I have one quick one. I mean, we obviously see this as a reoccurring theme over and over again. So I guess my question is, at this point, the audits have been performed, and I would assume that we have reached out to these principals and their administrative assistants on these. What kind of responses are we getting when these findings are made? I guess is my thing, because it, and I hate to present it this way, but it's we're not surprised, right? This is common in our findings. So, and I know that we always talk about, yes, and training is provided, and we're constantly updating these things, but you know, the goal obviously is to have these not be there anymore. But again, I'm curious to what the responses are by these individuals in charge when these are brought up, because when I see 100% of schools posted SAP were not approved, we're not talking about we're talking 100% failure rate. not 2% or 3% is the exact opposite. So I guess my question again, to reiterate, is what kind of responses are we getting from that when these are brought up?
Well, Travis, you know, we do a written report and we enumerate every finding, and then we quote whatever policy or best practice that they're supposed to follow. And then Davina has a verbal conference with every principal and their secretary to go over line by line these detailed reports. And I'm sure she can attest to, it's still a light bulb moment for these principals and secretaries. And they'll be like, oh, well, you know, I didn't know that, even though they may have been through training in some cases. And then in other cases, it's like, yeah, we knew that, and we just need to do a better job. You know, we need to get some practices in place to make sure that we I approve payroll on time, or, you know, things of that nature. So I always say that the audit is the best training tool. And, you know, we have hundreds of schools. And so these schools that you're seeing, these are not repeat audits. These are new audits. And so, well, I say new audits. We have a cycle of, we try to do, you know, as many as we can and cycle through, you know, over how many years it takes us to cycle through. So it's a new audit maybe for these people, because maybe we haven't done an audit in many, many years at that school. And that's what we try to do, is we have a chart where we list the schools that we've audited, and we go back to the oldest ones and audit in that order. And we have a lot of personnel changes at the school, so oftentimes, you know, you've got a new principal and a new secretary at that school, so, and maybe new to the whole process. So again, these are relatively in that in that looking at it that way, these are new audits, and so it's a teaching tool. And so, I almost invariably we hear they've learned from the process. So we do we want to make sure they understand. So that's why we do a written and a verbal conference with them. And then, of course, the responses are ones that we want to hear, that they're putting practices into place to make sure these things don't reoccur. What would be nice is if we had the staff to do follow-up audits and kind of check on them to say, okay, now you said you were going to do all these things, have you, and have these things worked? Very rarely do we get that opportunity. We do have a school that had a pretty bad audit. We presented to you guys a couple of times ago, and that principal said, will you please audit us again? Which is rare. We don't usually get requested, please audit me again. So I appreciate that, though, because she was so surprised, I guess, that they weren't doing things correctly. And so we told her we would. So we will have a follow-up audit of that school coming up in the next few months. But does that help answer?
Well, and I think that you must be communicating with me subliminally here, because you answered both of my questions already. One of those were being, you say this is a teaching moment, these audits, and the response said they are learning. So that's the good thing.
Right.
And the second thing was, I was going to say, what is their procedure on follow-ups?
Right.
And being short-staffed doesn't always allow us to do those, but I'm
Right.
encouraged by the principal that said, please, please, please audit me again.
Yes.
And that's the type of leadership we want to see, because like I said, and I understand that we're going through these audits. There's a lot of schools and we don't catch them all, and it may be 3-4 years before they see an audit again.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it's the same theme. So and I'm not at all suggesting a change in policy that it would fall on the principal, but it seemed like the system there is a little bit broken, I think, and I think ultimately as we go forward is how do we better it? If we're seeing the same things over the course of audits, we have staff members moving around, obviously I guess I'm just looking for how do we improve, right? And because and the hard thing is, and I realize, is that it is a moving target, right? Mm-hmm. Staff moves, we got new people in place. They don't get audited, frequently enough, due to staffing situations. But I think that as something that's a reoccurring theme, mm-hmm. we need to see what maybe our process is and how we're looking at that to get better in it. That's all.
Right. Yeah, and in our mind, it's probably more important to catch a school that hasn't been audited in years rather than go back to one that was just audited, because at least they were provided the tools and informed of things, where maybe some school, sometimes we'll audit a school and the secretary and maybe even the principal have been there for years and been doing it the same way. They just haven't been doing it correctly all that time, Also, this is a very antiquated system. We still have paper timesheets. And it takes the secretary at the school inputting on her computer leave and exceptions to payroll. So it's a very labor intensive and antiquated system. And I know you've heard Heather speak about things that they're doing to modernize the payroll process. And we've piloted Kronos. I'm not sure that we're going to continue with that program, but they are looking at ways to bring it up and modernize it, and hopefully decrease some of the errors and the manual labor that it requires.
There you go, reading my mind again. I think that that plays a lot to it, and that the system is older and antiquated system. I think once we see Polk County Public Schools catch up with the rest of the world and how they filed those, I think we'll probably see some of those error rates go down. So I appreciate it.
I do too. Absolutely. Any more questions up to this point? Okay. The last thing we will talk about is the annual purchasing card inventory. to differentiate, this is not where we test expenditures, which will be coming up in the next few months. This is the actual physical cards that the purchasing department, according to their procedure manual, they have to do an annual inventory of all cards that are out there, because every principal and every director is issued a card. We had 698 active cards for 169 schools and departments at the time of this inventory. And so what the Internal Audit Services Department does is we look at the inventory forms that were sent in and compare that to the active P card list that is on the banking system online for any discrepancies. This year was a better audit in the fact that we only had 2 findings, where we found 1 lost card that was not canceled timely, and 1 inventory form included the incorrect last 4 digits of a card number. So in our report to the purchasing department, we recommended that they remind cardholders to notify not only the bank, which this cardholder said they did, but to also notify the purchasing department if they have a lost or stolen card, because then the purchasing department will follow up and make sure it's canceled. But in this case, they didn't notify the purchasing department. They thought notifying the bank was sufficient, but somehow it got, lost and dropped in through the cracks, and it wasn't canceled. So we didn't know about it until the time of the inventory. At that time, the purchasing department deactivated the card, but obviously you want to do that so that you don't have fraudulent activity. And then as far as accurate inventory forms, we recommended that obviously if they've made a mistake that they have to issue a revised form, which in this case that they did. And that's the internal audit update. Any questions for us?
I'm going to do a kudos on that one. Out of 698 active cards, only 2 findings. It seems like we're doing something right there. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
All righty. Any other questions for Carol or Davina? None? All right. Moving right along, we're going to open up here for public comments if there are any. We need to be playing maybe Jeopardy music during this portion. Hearing none, we're going to move along to the final item on the agenda, setting the next meeting date. It looks like proposed August 1st at 9 a.m. Is there anybody present other than Mr. Jennings that has an issue with that? All right.
Oh,
There you
yeah,
go,
Travis.
Chris.
I
Yes,
won't
sir.
be there August 1st. I'm out of town.
Okay. Well, I hope that you enjoy wherever you're at. We appreciate you being here today. Well, if it's good with everybody else, we'll send out reminders for that, and so everybody can add it to their calendar. And want to again say thank you to everyone that was you take your time today to do this and the questions. Very, very, very informative. And again, appreciate everybody. Mr. Jennings, farewell to you. Thank you, sir, for your many years of service. We appreciate you as always. And with that being said, we're going to adjourn at 10:08. Appreciate everyone. Have a wonderful